Can I sit there? I was kind of waiting for somebody. Yeah, I know.
It's Freya.
I didn't think you'd come. Me neither. Until I was walking towards you, I didn't think I had it in me.
You know, upon closer inspection, this film isn't as great as I thought it was. Love, Simon is a 2018 film adaptation of the 2015 novel Simon vs. the Homo sapien Agenda, wherein main character, Simon Spear, is a teenager who must deal with the trials of high school drama. With one big twist, he is in fact...
Nobody knows I'm gay.
And is in a corresponding relationship with classmate, who is also gay, nicknamed Blue. What's more, local asshole Martin finds these emails and blackmails Simon in order to try and win over crush Abby. Martin doesn't get his way and outs Simon. Where these two media pieces truly depart is, in the book, Simon finds out Blue is acquaintance Bram while on the Tilt-A-Whirl after sending him a private email. In the movies, Simon learns who Blue is through the very public setting of the Ferris wheel, and where they kiss in front of presumably their entire high school population. So what's the issue with the movie? I mean, beyond the shitty friends who don't understand why Simon is scared of being outed, the reactions to being outed, the blackmailing, casual homophobia, and the forced outing? It's just really awkward. Okay, but in all honesty, the fact of the matter is that this movie highlights a lot of issues with how queer narratives are dealt with in the mainstream. So let's dive into it. First off, hi! For those of you who don't know me, my name is Allie, and...
Spoiler alert, I'm not straight.
I kind of ping-ponged my identity for a couple years now, but as of recording this, I identify as bi. I'm attracted to both females and males. For the most part, I don't have a coming-out narrative, or at least not in the way the media portrays it. One, I never struggled with my identity. I realized I was attracted to girls, and that was it. And because of where I grew up, my friends, family, and general social standing, I never felt any fear about said attraction. As for the act of coming out, well, serious conversation with my mom, Tammy's drive-thru with my dad, my best friend just knew, my cousin and I came out to each other at the same time, and I forgot to come out to my brother. Yeah, that was a thing. What I'm saying is that unlike how the media portrays it, my coming out experience wasn't dramatic. Other than my brother getting mad at me because I forgot to tell him, and honestly, I just thought he knew, none of them have been that memorable. And maybe that's why my relation to the coming out narrative is so negative, because I don't find I can relate that easily. Or maybe just a lot of them are shit. Now, I'm not saying that if you personally relate to these narratives, you're invalid or wrong. There is a reason for their popularity. What I am saying is that it's kind of annoying when every queer story is basically boiled down to the same two plot lines: coming out and being out. So, what is the coming out narrative and why do I dislike it so much? The coming out narrative is defined by TV tropes as a character's journey to embracing who they really are, with usual storylines of someone being overly supportive, someone being revealed to be homophobic, someone suspected all along, and inclusion of some sort of hate crime. This is also included with the forced out, which carries all the hallmarks listed, but the character's not willing to leave the closet. And let me be clear, I am not saying anything against coming out. Described as the quintessential queer narrative and the most momentous act in the life of any queer person, coming out is, unfortunately, a near universal experience for queer people. Even uneventful coming outs, you are still coming out. You are still having to say, I am queer. The issue is that for many queer characters, coming out is not just a life-changing moment, it is the only moment they can have. And why is that? Well, pop culture is meant to appeal to a mass population. In order to get a return on the investment, production companies want to engage as many viewers as possible. This is usually done through assimilating all viewers into the dominant mind frame, the white, cisgender, heterosexual, and usually male. If a queer character exists, they are used to help reinforce this mindset instead of critiquing it. In fact, it's most likely queer representation in the mainstream didn't become a thing until producers wanted to appeal to a queer and socially minded audience. Then why is pop culture so obsessed with this one mind frame? Well, it has to do with normativity, because pop culture requires a base of normativity in order to appeal to the wide market and thus must uphold conceptions of normativity. Which then brings us to homonormativity and heteronormativity. Heteronormativity, as understood in the Western world, is the dominant frame. To fall in line, you are either a masculine man or feminine woman. Life is viewed on this rigid binary, and as stated in Dehaney's article, as a consequence, non-normative gender and sexual identities, which may unsettle the privileged position of the heterosexual, are dismissed or subdued by institutions, practices, norms, and values that reify heteronormativity. Essentially, just by existing, queer people are forced to rectify their existence within this framework. How do they do this? Homonormativity. Stated and primarily understood through gay white men, homonormativity is upholding heterosexual social constructions in order to gain access to privilege, acceptance, and safety. This upholding reinforces many of the binaries understood by the mainstream, casting out sexualities and gender identities that do not adhere. This is actually reinforced by the coming out narrative, as the coming out narrative tends to reinforce gender binaries. One of the two big issues is it's always a question of sexuality, not gender, and the characters tend to be gay, whether male or female. Sexualities like bi, pan, ace, and aro just don't exist, and there is no mention of gender identities like non-binary or gender fluid. This exclusion means the heterosexual binary is allowed to persist by allowing a small amount of room for only some types of queerness that can be used to meet their needs. In summary, the coming out narrative favors a particular type of outing that is given dramatic importance, placing emphasis on the act of coming out in a heterosexual world without questioning the role of the binaries, and is usually placed onto primarily gay men, but also lesbians, without room for other identities. So then, is there any form of queer representation that doesn't fall into this trap? Yeah. I like to call it the casual gay. The casual gay is a character in a story who has a sexuality or gender expression outside of cis-hetero that is allowed to exist beyond that. They can have a coming out narrative, but are able to grow past it. Their narratives don't end once they're out. Let me actually start with what it isn't, because this might make it easier to understand. It is not queerbaiting. Queerbaiting is more or less defined as when creators hint at, but then do not actually depict, same-sex romance, other LGBTQ representations.
It's enough to be going on with, don't you think? The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street.
I shouldn't need to explain why this doesn't count, but for the sake of clarity, implying a character is queer through subtext doesn't work in a heterosexist world. If anyone can say they don't read the character as queer because it wasn't explicit, it unfortunately doesn't count. Speculation is not representation. So while shows that queerbait may be popular within the queer space, they do not push for good representation.
Then finish it. Because I'm with you to the end of the line.
Canonization outside the main text. This is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, the creators, or a creator, will state, usually in an interview and usually during a press tour, that a character within the media piece is somehow queer. This is usually done to bisexual characters. Here's two good examples. The creators of Thor Ragnarok stating that Valkyrie, who was a central character, was bisexual. This is not backed up by the text. By the way, side note, the character of Loki within the comics is gender fluid. Despite this actually being a part of their identity, there is no move to canonize it within the MCU. Another good example is Korrasami from Legend of Korra, who are, at the end of the series, are said by creators to have entered a relationship. The final scene having confirmed this. This is the scene, by the way. scream canon couple. And bear in mind, we did see a heterosexual wedding not like 5 minutes ago. The issue is similar to the aforementioned queerbaiting, but worse, as the media piece is allowed to gain publicity for it without actually doing it. You should not need an additional piece of information to fully understand the intention of the text. To canonize outside feels like you have been robbed of the character and representation. And canonization isn't hard. It's not like the I'm blank statement. Kissing, declarations of love, offhand comments, passing remarks, even situational humor can all out a character without making a production or really calling attention to it.
If he knew the truth, I would not have you and countless others fall in vain attempt. Come. There's much planning yet needed towards Neapolis.
You want to dance?
Yeah.
Finally, the queer personality or queer sidekick. You're gay, and that's your personality. You're also probably the gay best friend. Pretty simple to understand, being queer as a personality trait without development. A two-dimensional caricature that most of us are familiar with. You can basically throw a dart and you'd land on one. There are more things that don't make up the casual gay, but those are kind of the big ones. So what is the casual gay? I mean, it's a character who is gay and allowed to exist outside of it. Here's some examples.
Hey Adora, how's it hanging?
Adora and Catra from the rebooted She-Ra is a good starting point. For context, Catra and Adora start off as best friends in the Horde until Adora switches sides after learning what the Horde is actually doing. Throughout the next 4.5 seasons, we are given a tug of war between these two characters as they are driven apart and yet clearly want the other back. There was even an episode where Adora becomes stuck in a different reality where Catra is still her friend. We see the effect this breakup has on them, Catra becoming erratic in behavior and Adora is clearly feeling strained from having to fight her best friend. Once Catra switches sides, we get to see their loving friendship return.
Why did you come back? We both know I don't matter. You matter to me. What's going on? Ooh, are we messing with Adora? Catra, do you have to sit right there? No, don't.
I'm sorry, I got angry. It's something I'm working on.
Oh, you are?
Yes! Now can you please? Yes, I am.
And until the last episode, it honestly feels like queerbaiting circa Voltron.
And shot his arm off. We had a bonding moment.
But then they kiss. They're gay. And in love.
I love you too.
I'll admit, while the final kiss seems a bit of a cop-out, couple things to keep in mind. The final kiss is a common trope among all forms of media, and honestly, it's usually not nearly as deserved, and this actually recontextualizes the whole show. They were gay the whole time. Those scenes that feel like queerbaiting aren't actually queerbaiting. They were foreshadowing. The main character is queer, gets the girl at the end of the story, and is allowed to exist outside of their queerness. Another good example is the Magnus Archives. The Magnus Archives is an anthology-based horror podcast that follows main character Jonathan Sims as he falls into the dark underbelly that lurks behind his world. And, big spoiler warning for end of season 4 and all of season 5, John ends up with archival assistant Martin Blackwood. They get together at the end of season 4 and continue into season 5 as a couple. John is revealed in an earlier season to be asexual.
Do you know if he and John ever... No clue, and not interested. Although, according to Georgie, John doesn't. Like, at all. Huh. Yeah, that does explain some stuff.
Martin from as early as season 2 is shown to have a crush on John. While they are in a queer relationship, at no point is it treated differently than if one of them were female assigned. What I mean is, their relationship is important because it's about love. Not because it's queer. But this is not a romance or drama. They affirm that queer characters do not have to be restricted to only a handful of genres if they approach main character status. The Old Guard is another good example. Nikki and Joe never have to come out. We are simply told that they are a couple through words and actions. The plot does not dwell on their sexuality. The only time we really see affirmation is when one of them is threatened.
And he's not my boyfriend. He's all and he's more.
Incurable romantic.
And I mean, come on. You can't expect a couple not to be protective of each other. They don't exist within a void. There are personalities behind their sexuality. And it's an action movie. Like a really good action movie. And romance also is not really an issue. While queer couples tend to be restricted to romance, that doesn't mean they're bad. Take Red, White, and Royal Blue, an immensely popular new adult novel that follows the USA president's son Alex as he falls for the Prince of England, Henry. While Alex does have to come to terms with his sexuality, has to come out, and is forced out, there's a lot more focus on the political scandal this creates than on the actual whole gay thing. Also, Alex is bi, which again we don't see a lot of, and they're basically together by page 129. This puts us on a good place to circle back to Love, Simon. Why is the book okay and the movie not? The book at least understands that we cannot treat queer romances the same way we treat heterosexual ones. Simon knows he can't out Blue and doesn't want to. While he is hurt by Blue's cutoff, he gets it. And more importantly, he makes none of his confessions to Blue publicly. His reach out about the carnival is done through email, they meet on a tilt-a-whirl and then go back to Simon's place. It's cute, and more importantly, it gets what is so important about coming out. The movie does try at least. Simon does explain it to Martin.
I'm supposed to be the one that decides when and where and how and who knows and how I get to say it. That's supposed to be my thing. And you took that away from me.
But at the end of the day, he basically forces Blue to reveal himself. And if this were a straight couple, there wouldn't be an issue with it. But it isn't. Unfortunately, coming out is complicated and messy, and it almost never fits with what shows and movies tell us. And that isn't what we want or need. Queer people exist outside of their sexualities. They exist in a range of experience and choices. And they exist outside of cheesy romance and tear-jerking dramas. And tone-deaf shows. There is nothing wrong with liking a coming out story. Every queer person has one. But being reduced to that very moment to say your experiences before coming out are somehow false and you are only truly free once out isn't realistic. These stories prey on the idea of normativity, that this rigid binary we are shown must be accepted, but simply being is enough to question it. There is no saying how the media landscape will change with each year, how queer stories will be incorporated into more text, and more importantly, queer voices being allowed to dictate these texts, to give the nuance, humor, and respect that a collection of people have been forcibly denied.